All right, I'm going to call this special meeting and study session of the City Commission to order for Monday, July 22nd. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And as always, we begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples, who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. And with that, I will start to see if, nope, almost forgot roll call. Hand it over to Benjamin for roll call. Sorry about that.
Yes, and good evening. Commissioner Anderson?
Here.
Commissioner Shaw?
Here.
Commissioner Stanley? Commissioner Treadwell? Mayor Pro Tem Wilson? Commissioner Werner?
Here.
And Mayor Shamrow?
Here, and we are here with eking by with a quorum. So thankfully no 5 votes tonight. And I will lead us off then now with announcements from the city manager.
Hi, I just wanted to reiterate what I put in my weekly update over the weekend, that the community partners have been meeting regularly on housing and homelessness issues, and there will be an update forthcoming, a more thorough update forthcoming on those efforts. And I just want to thank I want to thank the Community Foundation and Rotary Charities, who has been putting together a really great space for facilitated discussion where we all feel heard and everyone can share their ideas in a safe place. So I will have an update later this summer.
Okay. And announcements from the city clerk, and I think a special announcement too, correct? Yeah.
Yes, I've got meetings announced for this week, the week of July 22nd. The Act 345 Pension System Board will meet on Tuesday, July 23rd. That's at noon in the training room on the 2nd floor of the Governmental Center. And at this time, we are not anticipating that the City Commission will meet again until Monday, August 12th. That's because Monday, July 29th is a 5th Monday. Monday, August 5th is election eve, and so the next anticipated City Commission meeting is Monday, August 12th. We're recruiting for a number of board and committee seats, so anyone interested in volunteering or knows someone who might be interested in volunteering, we've got opportunities on the Brown Bridge Advisory Committee, Board of Zoning Appeals, Coast Guard Committee, Grand Traverse Common Joint Planning Commission, Historic Districts Commission, Human Rights Commission, and Parks and Recreation Commission. And anyone interested in those opportunities, I encourage to contact the city clerk's office. We now have a survey online seeking input through July 28th on the draft master plan, and that can be found on the city's website under the projects page. Early in-person voting for the August 6th primary will begin this Saturday, July 27th, and those hours are daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. from Saturday, July 27th through Sunday, August 4th. The wastewater treatment plant is hosting its annual open house on Friday, August 2nd, and additional information can be found on the city's website. And last and certainly not least, it's with a heavy heart that I share that Janine Easterday passed away last week. Janine served on the City Commission, the Planning Commission, and most recently on the Master Plan Leadership Team. She also helped power democracy by serving as an election inspector and early voting election worker for the city. Janine was a compassionate leader. She was a fierce protector for our watershed and someone who was always willing to engage. And I truly believe that Traverse City is better because Janine chose to be here. And lastly, I'll just share some words to describe Janine, and I would say sensitive, intuitive, strong, smart, and caring. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Benjamin. As many of us I know got a chance to work with her in different capacities. I know through all the great service she listed, you were able to serve with her very closely on all of those. And I agree with you, she will be missed, and she definitely made this community a better place. So thank you for that. Now we will continue with the business at hand, and I will, we have some votes here. They're pretty needed to happen because of the next 2 weeks we have off, but not anything, by it being under a special meeting, we don't want people to think this is an implication that these were special rushed items. They are because we are not having a meeting with the 5th Monday next week, and then the election, which would normally be our next business meeting. We will not be meeting that first Monday of August like we normally would. So these are up for discussion and for votes like they would be on any other agenda. But I think sometimes when people see things on a special meeting agenda, they worry that they're being forced or it's an emergency for some reason, and it really is just timing tonight. So with that, I will hand it over to City Manager Vogel to talk about the Michigan Municipal League appointment.
Hi, yes, well, this is the first municipality where I have been a member of the Michigan Municipal League, and I will be attending the conference in September, and so traditionally in the past, the city has appointed a delegate, and so that is what we are asking tonight, to be designated as the official delegate to vote on behalf of the city of Traverse City at the annual business meeting, which will take place at the annual conference on Mackinac on September 11th through the 13th.
Does anybody have any questions about the procedure, or does anybody want to make a motion, please?
I will make the motion that the city manager, Elizabeth Vogel, be designated as official delegate to vote on behalf of the city of Traverse City for the 2024 annual business meeting of the Michigan Municipal League being held on Mackinac Island, September 11th through the 13th, 2024.
Support.
Thank you, Mitch. All right, any other discussion on this? Any public comment on this item? Bring it back. We've got a motion by Shaw, second by Treadwell. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for that. And now we have the consideration of a new off-premise tasting room license. And I don't know if Liz want to tease that up, or if Benjamin, you're just ready to go.
Benjamin looks ready to go.
I'm happy to. Just quickly, this is a request from El Mabi to have a tasting room license at Mundo's. It would also provide for Sunday morning sales permit and participation permit. That participation permit is something that's necessary when two businesses join together to provide beverages. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's essentially what this is.
Do we have any questions about it? Go ahead, Jackie.
Sure, thank you. I wondered at our study session on the subject of healthy drinking culture, we talked about starting to receive data reports about our trends in liquor licensing. And I just wondered if there's a target date when we might expect those to begin?
Yes, we're currently working on putting together the information that was requested from the commission, comprehensive first-time report, and I'm expecting that that'll be available sometime in early September.
Great, thank you. While you're researching, I think it would be a good point of information to know when the last time was that the city did not approve a request for a liquor license. So that would be, for me, a very helpful piece of information. And then finally, this is a question not for Benjamin, but for us as a body. Wondering if there is any support to exploration of a cap or maybe a short-term moratorium on new liquor licenses, digest what we learned at the study session, and I'd appreciate some feedback from my peers.
Before I would ask for weighing in, I'd look to Lauren. We do always have discretion, we know that. But we also, if we've consistently been giving liquor licenses, I would put the question to Lauren, would that suddenly stopping or deciding not to with no change in criteria or extra information potentially open us up to a lawsuit?
I think that it's something that typically a moratorium is enacted through an ordinance, so there is some time for sort of due process in that regard. I'd want to look at whether there are any that are in the pipeline or in the process that wouldn't have the benefit really of that. So that may be a discussion that I need to have with the clerk's office to understand whether that's the case. But I think if there's notice, that's something that can be discussed.
So I guess I would put it back and say, is that something we're looking to do now in the next couple of weeks, or can all of that be kind of part of the discussion in September?
I would be very happy to see it discussed in September.
Great. I think so too.
Just trying to get a sense of
Totally appreciate
where
that.
we stand.
Yep, absolutely, totally appreciate that. Go ahead.
I think it's pretty well known that prohibition doesn't work. It doesn't work for alcohol, it doesn't work for books, it doesn't work for lifestyles. I feel that All I can do is urge people to educate themselves about the health consequences of alcohol, the societal consequences, the effects on your work and your family. And I still think that a pivot of our tourism campaign, not ours,
Yes.
the tourism campaign, towards culture and art and away from beer party, wine party, would be really helpful in this, in the promotion, the healthy promotion of Traverse City.
I agree. We have a lot of great arts institutions here that we can definitely celebrate all year long.
And
So-
artists.
And artists, absolutely.
And I think the substitution of a more positive image for the community is spot on. Very, very sensible. Thanks.
So are there any other questions about this, or does anybody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that the resolution recommending the approval of the request from L. Mawby LLC, also known as Mawby, Stuart M. Lang and Peter J. Lang for a new off-premises tasting room license with full drinks and a new Sunday sales AM permit and a new participation permit with Mundo's Roasting and Company be adopted, and that the city clerk be authorized to issue a liquor license registration to El Mawby LLC for it to operate such license and permits at 305 West Front Street, Traverse City, Michigan 49684.
Thank you. A second?
Support.
Thank you, Tim. Okay, I have motion by Shaw, second by Warner. The one thing I will note on here is, or I guess I would have a question, and this kind of goes to the general discussion. I don't have concerns because that corner tends to be relatively quiet. And I know we have representation here from this group. I know that this location at 305 Pine doesn't tend to stay open very late, and it's kind of more of a daytime operation. So is that the intention, or is there an intention to expand the hours? And you can approach the podium if you want to answer. Go ahead.
Thank you. So as of right now, the intention is to be open. Actually, Mundo's already extended their hours. They're open till 8 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and that is the plan for us to continue those hours. So we'll be closed at 8 p.m. I think there's a chance that we might do events, dinners, stuff like that in the space that might go past that, but as of right now, there's no intention. Even the Sunday, they're not even open Sunday. We're applying for that permit just to have it in case we want to do something, but that, as of right now, there's no plans to do that.
And I apologize. My question was more in the mode of you're not going to be suddenly open until midnight or 2 a.m.
No, definitely not.
Thank you. Any other questions at this time?
Yes, since the applicant is here, this doesn't directly concern this license, but there are other Mundo's locations in the city. Is there any vision down the road of pursuing similar licensure for them as well?
It would just depend on the success of this one. So at this time, no, we haven't.
Okay.
Yeah, our agreement is just for operating the 305 location.
Thank you for that, Peter.
Just for the record and for those listening, would you just identify yourself?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Peter Lang from Mawby Winery.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions while we've got Peter up here? All right. Thank you. We will open this now for public comment. Any public comment at this time?
And I'll state the rules for public comment for this evening. Please state your name and address. Indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We do have a 3-minute time allotment. When your time is elapsed, a timer will beep, and we ask that all language be respectful to everyone. Thank you.
Justin Reed, 630 Cottage Drive, apartment 1B, Traverse City resident. Talking about healthy drinking culture with this liquor license is that, one event that we have is Cherry Festival, and that has a lot of liquor into it, and I'd like to see like the bigger events like Cherry Festival more towards the aspect of agriculture, more displays of like tractors and everything else, because I think the Cherry Festival has gone away from the agriculture to just the concert events and just for the rides, the fair and that. But I think that when we're talking about arts and everything else, is maybe we need to think about, an example of the Cherry Festival and it being that has to be more towards agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
My name is Dan Paulson. I'm a resident of Long Lake Township, 2700 East Cedar Valley Road. I'm a builder and a developer. My lifelong passion has been energy efficiency and sustainable development. My company has currently proposed a development on Gray Road near the intersection with Cedar Run. It's a kind of remarkable
Sir,
project.
just to let you know, and this is my fault, usually I do a better job prefacing this, this is about the application for Mobby's permit. Does this relate to that?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, I'm sorry. Usually I try to remind people, and twice now in the last couple of weeks I've done it and misled people, so that is on me, I apologize.
Okay.
There will be general public comment at the end.
Thanks.
Sorry
I'm a
about
newcomer
that,
here.
I apologize. And it shouldn't be too long of a meeting, we don't have that many more agenda items, so thank you for your patience. Any other items or discussion on this item of the Mobby permit with Mundos? Sorry about that. Okay, seeing none, I'm going to bring it back to the commission. Any last questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all for that. And we'll move on now to the Shady Lane Partners liquor license permit. And Benjamin, you can go ahead and run with that.
Yes, this is somewhat similar in the sense that it's a partnership between a manufacturer and a business. And so Shady Lane is looking to provide tastings of their product at the Grand Traverse Distillery location on East Front Street. And they're also seeking to add a new dance entertainment permit as well as the Sunday AM sales and outdoor service permit in connection with that. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to address them, but the information's pretty much there in the packet.
And the dance entertainment permit, because that comes up a lot, and as I recall, we've discussed that it's kind of an interesting name, and it just means that they can have like live music and such, right? Or is it a more defined?
Nope, that's really it. Live music is essentially what that's about.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any questions or would like to make a motion? Go ahead and have.
The live music, will that be audible? Will that be?
It'll be inside.
Okay, so not like the corner of the
Oh.
Cass and Front, which
Oh.
lets its music flow out into the street?
Not like
Dance
that.
Okay, so this is inside.
Yep.
We have a motion.
This is a place that already has another form of license, so this is just expanding the licensing that exists at that location. So I recommend that the resolution recommending the approval of the request from Shady Lane Partners LLC for a new joint off-premise tasting room license with full drinks and a new outdoor service area permit, a new Sunday sales AM permit, a new dance entertainment permit, and a new participation permit with Grand Traverse Distillery be adopted, and that the city clerk be authorized to issue a liquor license registration to Shady Lane Partners LLC for it to operate such license and permits at 215 East Front Street, Traverse City, Michigan, 49684.
Thank you, Mitch.
Before I second that, I have a question. Why does it say new dance and new? It implies that there were old permits.
I don't really know. There weren't, I can tell you that. It's,
Well,
yeah,
if somebody were to look at this, they would think there were old.
understood, yes, yeah.
Okay, I'll second this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from the commission? Seeing none, any public comment on this item about the Shady Lane Partners permit? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. And, lucky you, sir, because we wanted to make sure that no one would assume that the study session topic we have next would have any direct action on it, because we have no intention of taking action on it, I will be taking a public comment at the end of this special meeting and then adjourning it so we can go into a study session. So at this time, we will take public comment on any item, sir, and you can go right ahead and you don't even have to sit through the second part.
Thank you for your patience. This is the first time I've attended one of these meetings.
Thank you.
As I said, I'm Dan Paulson. I'm a builder and developer, and my whole focus of my business is sustainable development. We proposed a development near the corner of Gray Road and Cedar Run Road that nothing really has ever been done like this in the Midwest. It's 126 units. It's all net zero. It's a very kind of a revolutionary septic system that produces water or effluent that's 99.9% pure. It's being designed as a series of pocket neighborhoods, and we're making it as affordable as possible. Affordable is kind of a nasty word today, but we're making it as affordable as possible. It's going to end up in the missing middle. This project depends on having municipal water supply. I had first proposed a collaboration between Garfield Township and Long Lake Township 7 years ago. And we developed our plans based on the accessibility of a municipal water system. The reason is this is a high-density development, and there's not room on the same property for a private sanitation system and private wells. So I've read recently and heard about some of the conflict between the townships and the DPW, and I would just like to express my sincere hope that that can be resolved and that we can get water to Long Lake Township. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other general public comment at this time?
So Richard Robbins, I'm a resident at 720 Center Place in Traverse City. I just wanted to maybe set you up for some thoughts here, that we're actually in a very exciting time that I don't think a whole lot of people recognize where we're at, and that's really an inflection point around e-technology. And this is really around multimodal, non-automotive transportation. It's all going to hit us really fast and much faster than planned. All new non-combustible, non-combustion engine e-technology vehicles, all new ones are going to be developed in the next 5 years. And I mean, they are going to be quite innovative. This isn't just about an e-bike. This is about being able to provide transportation to people who can't afford cars and who can't, who need to get to work. And the marketplace is going to drive this. So I think this is very important for our discussions with MAP in the future and also currently. We need to plan for this transition because of the infrastructure needs to support it. Safe lanes and safe transportation. So I think the thing I was really here to talk to you about is I'd encourage you to start really doing some searches around e-technology, what these vehicles are going to start to look like. And they're already coming. If you were at the Cherry Festival, you saw the tricycle vendor that had the e-technology. It's going to be quite a change in our transportation infrastructure. And there are big advantages to cities like Traverse City. First of all, your lower infrastructure costs and long-term lower impact of vehicles because they're lighter and they're quieter. Number two, they're safer streets and transportation with lower speeds, you know, and less mass to the vehicle. So it's a really safer technology that's going to come. It's also going to be a 12 season because, you know, studded tires with a fat tire or vehicles do not hurt the pavement. And it's also a cleaner environment, to just name a few. So I just wanted to share with you, you know, as we're talking about MAP, we have something that's going to be coming very soon that is going to be revolutionary. And as a city council and Cherry Capital Cycling Club and others, we're going to be helping to support those decisions because it's going to make the city really accessible and a great place to live. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Justin Reed. The construction project has already started on Veterans Drive between the city limits and 14th Street. The intersection of 14th Street is a light right there. So with Veterans Drive being closed, I'm just wondering if DPS, if they're going to put that in flasher mode right there. Due to the fact that if it's closed, nobody's going to be turning at that intersection. So with it just operating regularly, that's going to be an issue of traffic trying to get through there. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Justin. Any other public comment at this time? General public about anything? I'll bring it back and see, Justin, that's an interesting question about the timing of the light there with it being closed. So we'll see if we get an answer on that. And thank you for the updates. We always like to hear about new technologies out there. So with that, seeing no other public comment, any final public comment from the commissioners, though we are about to go into a study session, so you will have a second bite at the apple. All right, seeing none, I'm going to adjourn. We'll do this formally. The special meeting, we will now go into our study session to discuss the draft mobility action plan. And I'll let them get that set up really quick. If your business is taken care of, feel free to leave. If you're here for that or just want to hear, please feel free to hang out.
While they're getting set up, I was wondering if I could.
Please, absolutely.
So this process has been going on for 2 years, and I've been here for a little, like, not quite 7 months. And so I'm getting caught up on a number of different things. And so I just wanted to sort of put out a lay of the land as I understand it. So the Mobility Action Plan is a subtopic plan that will be incorporated within the appendix of the master plan. It was initiated in the late summer of 2022, so 2 years ago, after the master plan was underway, in response to a demonstrated need for a citywide non-motorized vision. So funding for this project was provided by the city, the DDA, and along with grants from the MEDC, or Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and from Rotary Charities. The planning process involved extensive community engagement, coordinated with our master plan process, which our planning director will speak to in his presentation. The plan establishes the community's values related to non-motorized transportation, sets design criteria, and outlines decision-making processes. So I am actually really excited that the adoption of the master plan and mobility plan is happening right as we start getting into strategic planning, because I think it'll help guide those conversations. And on that note, you know, I was looking through the mobility action plan, and as we talk about the plan and think about constructive criticism, I'm also hoping that the commissioners will share what you find valuable in this plan. For instance, and I'm just going to share 2 examples from today as I was reading it again, I thought that the matrix tool on pages 58 and 59 was useful. I think it'll help inform how staff make recommendations and decisions, but also how we communicate and educate the public on how those decisions come together. And I also was intrigued by the list of potential policy changes, and I think that those could be used for thoughtful conversation and springboard conversations during the strategic planning process as well. So I just wanted to start by making a few comments of my own, and I also just really want to thank the members of the leadership team, the Planning Commission, the stakeholder groups, and our community for their participation and the hundreds of volunteer hours that have been put into not just the master plan, but also the mobility action plan. And with that, we have our planning director, Sean Winter, and the Planning Commission Chair, Debbie Hershey, here with us tonight.
Well,
Thank
really
you.
quickly, I just wanted to say too, because I noticed this was similar in our last meeting, how the header was master plan and mobility action plan. But today, we're really talking about the mobility action plan, just like a couple week ago, time means nothing anymore. We were just talking about the master plan. And so I just wanted to clarify for those watching at home, and as we have this discussion, we are focusing on the mobility action plan tonight. Both agenda items will be coming back in the future, but that's what this presentation is going to focus on. So if people say, hey, wasn't this question asked about master plan, or wasn't this discussed, those questions and comments will be addressed in the future, but right now we're just talking about the master plan. Or, sorry, mobility, I just did it myself, mobility action plan.
Yeah, you are correct, and it is a little confusing, I get it. So thank you, Manager Vogel, for that overview. I'd also like to acknowledge the DDA CEO, Harry Burkholder, who is here, as the DDA was a partner on this component of the plan and assisted in that. So we're going to give a high-level rundown of the Mobility Action Plan. Again, this is a subtopic plan, is authorized by the Planning Enabling Act as part of the master plan. So when we set out on this, the intent was to develop a plan that highlights the community's mobility vision and values. We wanted to develop a network map so we know where a built-out network would occupy throughout the city. And we built that map based on crash data, existing infrastructure, community feedback, a variety of different inputs. We wanted to identify the challenges in the city's current mobility infrastructure process so that we could be more successful and efficient at implementing improvements, as well as work through the roles and responsibilities of the different parties, such as city staff, the city commission, our different elected and appointed officials, and then really work towards incorporating this into our CIP process, which is something that we've started already prior to this plan adoption. So again, this started in August of '22, a few months after the master plan, but we really hustled to get it together so that we could coordinate it with the master plan effort. Those of you who participated and were around at that time, you may recall that we used one survey instrument for both topics. We did one open house for both, so that people weren't asked to fill out 2 surveys, go to 2 events, really try to gather all that information. And frankly, a lot of the input that we wanted for the master plan, we also wanted for the mobility plan, so there was a lot of overlap and it made sense to do it that way. Eventually, there came a point where the 2 projects became specific enough in their own lanes that they kind of diverged, and now we've come back together again. So throughout the last approximate 2 years, we had 12 leadership team committee meetings, we had 3 joint planning commission meetings with the city commission, that's not counting the one that we had in February, 2 community open houses, now 3, because we had one last Thursday, 4 stakeholder focus groups, and 2 online surveys, and that's for this portion of the plan alone. So here's that timeline that was in there. Originally, we were aiming around June 2024 for completion. Now we're looking a little bit more at September. Sorry, not completion, but full adoption, having gone through the Planning Commission and the City Commission. And I'll end with the current timeline and the next steps. So some of the things that we heard through the process. So we, in developing this plan, realized that there's value in both the qualitative and quantitative data. And so a lot of the efforts that we embarked on we were able to collect both through. So through our focus groups, our community events, our surveys, and our leadership committee. Because there's the story that the data tells us, and there's the lived experience that the citizens tell us. And so we wanted to mesh those 2 together. So as mentioned, we had 4 different focus groups, and we categorized them into city staff to better understand the city procedures as it relates to mobility, our macro mobility focus groups, and these are more regional. If you look at some of those lists like MDOT, Airport Authority, Networks Northwest, we also invited our surrounding townships. In addition to the focus groups, we had a lot of one-off meetings with the planners in those townships to talk about the efforts that they're pursuing, the efforts we're pursuing, some of those key connections like Barlow and Veterans, where we know people cross the jurisdictional boundaries as they go about their day, and how we can try to align our efforts. Then we looked into micromobility groups, so those are more local nonprofits such as Beta, TART, Norte, some of the cycling and running clubs, and then a general stakeholder focus group, because we understand, mobility is a component of equity. So giving people mobility options helps address equity issues in the community. So we wanted to hear those perspectives as well. We did hold, over those 2 days, a 5th one that was kind of a catch-all. If you couldn't make it to the one that you were scheduled to, you could come to that last one. So throughout that process, our consultants took copious notes of the conversations that took place. Those were shared with the staff and the leadership team to help guide the process. Our first survey that we took at the onset of this project, which is the most important part for the public feedback, because that provides the direction throughout it. We had almost 2,000 survey responses. From that survey and what we heard in the open house, we then went back to the public with what we thought we heard in November to make sure, did we hear you correctly? Because that's really key at the beginning of a planning process to make sure that those guiding principles and things are established so that we have that framework to work in within the process. So our first open house, many of you attended. We held it at the Haggerty Center. We kind of divided the room into 2 spaces. So when you walked in, to the right was the master plan components, to the left was the mobility, and it was I was pleased. We had a really great turnout and a lot of great conversations that took place, a lot of insights. So there was a number of exercises related to the mobility action plan that we had at the open house. The first one, we had this giant billboard map if you attended, and we had a series of 4 dots of different colors, and we asked people to place them on the maps to, again, help us identify, where do you like biking and walking? Where is there a place that could use some improvements? Where are some places that just you straight up avoid? And then where are those destinations that you're trying to get to? And so with that, we were able to create these heat maps. And a lot of it wasn't too surprising, but it did provide affirmation from the public. We know that people like walking and biking. If you look here, that's where there's existing infrastructure. People feel safe. They do not like walking or biking. If you notice, that's some of our key busy corridors, and that's probably not too surprising. Similarly, where we could use improvements align with a lot of those. And then the destinations also are somewhat intuitive. We have downtown, we have the beaches, we have like Tom's West Bay where we have a grocery store, we have the colleges and schools at the base of the peninsula. and the amenities that we have around the north end of Boardman Lake. So we also asked people, in terms of the mobility network here in the city, what are the opportunities, what are the weaknesses, and what are the strengths? So we received over 469 separate sticky notes with inputs from people at the open house. This is in addition to the survey providing that input. We then had our consultants go through and they transcribed all of these into Excel and started categorizing them based on common themes to inform us. Another item we had there was we asked people to draw their favorite street in the city. Personally, I thought it was a little cheesy. I was really surprised by the fact that 83 people sat down and took the time to draw it. Moreover, I was really impressed by how artistic and talented some of our citizens are and what they were able to put in there. So that was a way to have people express in a way that they're not typically given. You know, they're not asked to come to a podium, but here, sit and write on your own, take your time. And it was insightful to us. So we collected all of those and scanned them. We also had kind of like a radio booth, if you remember. So that was like a podcast style where people could engage just in conversation. So one of our consultants sat there and they would ask questions and people could just speak freely about their experiences with our mobility network here in the city. So wrapping up that kind of first round, we had over 200 attendees that night. So over 550 dots on the mobility map of where people wanted to go. We had, as I mentioned, close to 500 sticky notes, 83 drawings, and about 40 interviews where people were willing to sit down and do the podcast, which provided us with over 100 minutes of audio that we have recorded from residents that can be listened to. So how was that distilled? Again, feedback was gathered in Excel, as I mentioned. We did the dot mapping exercise using GIS. We digitized all those so that we could create the heat maps where the concentrations were occurring. We took the results from the survey and the open house and summarized that in the community summary or community engagement report, which is chapter 13 of the master plan. And then we used that feedback to inform the development of the map as well as our vision and values, which was the start. So once we began working on the content of the map, we held another open house about 5 months later across the street over at the Alluvion. We brought the big, large billboard map again, and we had the draft network map imposed upon it. So people could begin commenting, and we could catalog those comments and use it. We also asked the people which vision statement they thought was most appropriate to create that network vision for mobility here in the city. And these were born out of the leadership team and then taken to the public for feedback. And the one that received the most votes was the first one, that Traverse City will be a place where people can access jobs, housing, amenities, and natural features using a safe and balanced mobility network that reduces the region's carbon footprint. So that's the one that we went with. We also wanted people to identify their values as they relate to their desire for an improved mobility network. And one thing that I thought was kind of interesting is not one of these stood out really above the rest. People saw value in the connectivity, environmental stewardship, adaptability to our transportation network, prosperity, which ties back to equality, and then of course for people. And then we also had a number of different names, and I believe we talked about this in one of our joint meetings that we had in the training room when construction was taking place. And we kind of just called this from the beginning the Traverse City Mobility Action Plan, realizing maybe a more descriptive name may come, but that's the one that people want to stick with. And it could have been because at that point, that's what they were used to calling it. So we ended up getting 69 additional comments on the billboard map that were then incorporated into the consideration for the leadership team. So we had just over 100 attendees at that second meeting. 31 comments were made on the vision statement. Values, we had 22 comments for consideration. Not much on the plan name exercise. As I mentioned, a lot of dots and sticky notes on the mobility map. And then in the foreground of the picture there was kind of a Complete Streets brand exercise where you could work with the streets and kind of design them. Everything was done to scale. I think those 4 people were me, my daughter, and 2 other children. Most people didn't really play with that one, but I thought it was fun. So the Mobility Leadership Committee, or team, is really the group that did the heavy lifting on this. So they were comprised of individuals representing the City Commission. Again, Commissioner Treadwell served on that one as well as Commissioner Stanley. We had city staff from the various departments that work within the mobility and development spheres. the DDA, Norte, Beta, Disability Network, and TART. So we met every month to go through this. We had quite lively discussions. It was a group, as you can see, I think that picture at the bottom really captures it. They would meet, roll up their sleeves, and get to work and talk these issues through. One thing we did kind of early in the process, which is that top photo, is we had our consultants and members of the leadership team join us, and we took them on a tour on bikes throughout the city. So we spent half a day going everywhere from Oakwood Cemetery to about the Commons to Slabtown, through the waterfront, downtown, all that. So they could see the different types of networks that we have, or sorry, facility types, as well as the gaps in our networks. So for quantitative data, this is where Tool Design, a sub-consultant that was used by Progressive AE that we were really pleased was part of this, they kind of took the lead on this. So they worked with our GIS manager, Jerry Swanson, as well as our former traffic engineer, Kyle Kobilski, on this data that is the quantitative, so that they could really start to digitize some of this. So they looked at existing traffic volumes, the bicycle crash data, crash density where they're occurring, same thing with pedestrians, the bicycle level of stress, pedestrian level of stress, and then the distance to nearest low stress crossing. So these are typically your signalized crossings that stop traffic. So example again of how we created this network map, we use both qualitative data to see where people do not like biking or walking, as well as the quantitative data. Where do we have the highest annual average daily traffic counts, speeds, travel lanes, things like that. So then we created a map of our existing bicycle network, which was nice because this kind of forced us as staff to put this information in GIS. We had part of it, but this caused us to make it more complete. Now we have that at our disposal that we can use. We also looked at the existing sidewalk network, which there aren't as many gaps in this city as you would think because of the efforts of the city commission in the past. We do have a few areas that are pretty devoid of sidewalks, so up in the northwest by Morgan Farms, the base of the peninsula, over where you have Indian Woods neighborhood, the southern part of Traverse Heights, and what's not indicated on here is kind of a portion of the SoFo neighborhood up to Buffy Hill. There aren't many sidewalks in there as well. There were some proposed in Safe Routes to School. They got cut out because it exceeded the bid exceeded our funding, so they had to make some changes there. Now that's something for the city commission to possibly consider in the future. What is your intent with these areas where we don't have sidewalks? Many of these streets also lack curb and gutter, which is difficult to put sidewalks on because without the curb and gutter moving the stormwater, that is where a lot of the water ends up. And then it proves to be problematic. We deal with that a lot on Lake Street. We get a lot of calls of icy sidewalks, muddy sidewalks, because there's nowhere else for the water to go, and the sidewalk ends up being the catchment for all of that. So then we started looking at distance to nearest crossings. So if you look here on Division at 11th, you'll see it's red. It's a graduated symbol, red being the furthest distance. So as you move north towards 7th, it becomes orange, yellow, and then white because you're getting within 500 feet of a signalized crossing. Same thing when you move south to 14th Street. Now, I will say, just because it's a signalized crossing does not mean that it's a safe crossing. Sometimes they feel very vulnerable because of the lanes and the turning movements. 14th and Division is a great example of that. So then we looked at the bicycle level of stress based on traffic volume, the crash data, and this was the proprietary analysis that Tool Design did for us. And once again, we can see a correlation between where we have the highest traffic volume and speeds and the highest level of bicycle stress. Then when we looked at the pedestrian level of stress, Tool's program that they use for this really focuses on the intersection nodes because unlike bikes, which are oftentimes required to travel with the vehicles, either with in the travel lane or a bike lane on the side, sidewalks are typically separated from the travel lanes. So there's not as much stress in between the nodes, but rather the crossings. And once again, this correlates with what we saw on the previous map with the busy corridors. So then what we did through this process was we took that qualitative data and all the layers of quantitative data and we put that together through many iterations with the leadership team to come up with the proposed network map. And so that is the proposed network map in this case. So we can see what a complete build out would look like. It does mark areas for paved trails where we have proposed vision bike networks to be implemented in the future, as well as crossing and intersection improvements, whether that location is most appropriate for a Hawk, an RRFB, a traffic signal if there is not one there. And then the circle, of course, across, the purple circle indicates that that's an improvement and not existing. So the rationale behind the mobility network map, the first is capital infrastructure improvements are context sensitive and require thoughtful planning and consideration. So that is something that we have to keep in mind as we move forward through implementation. Also, capital infrastructure improvements require community input and feedback with those most impacted. So just like we did with Madison and Jefferson, when it came time to reconstruct that, we had meetings with those residents and the neighborhood because they are the ones most impacted by that street. So their feedback was definitely important in the design that engineering worked through. 3, the mobility network map is meant to inform the city's capital improvements program. So as we start looking through other programmed improvements such as street reconstructions, we're going to need to reference this map and see what this plan calls for so that we know which direction we need to move as far as building out this network. And 4, the mobility network map facilitates the city's incremental build out of its mobility network, because now we have a plan in place with this map of where the infrastructure is supposed to be. So when we started this process, it was found that about 73% of the city, excluding the airport, is within a quarter mile of a bicycle facility. Our goal was to improve that, obviously, and we were able, through the network map, to get within 93%, once again, excluding the airport, with the 2 areas previously mentioned, kind of that northwest area by Morgan Farms and the base of the peninsula, which will take further analysis. So when it comes to implementing the plan, this plan intentionally took a non-prescriptive approach because it was never going to get granular enough to where every single street segment on the network map was going to be prescribed as to what facility type it's going to be. Rather, it put in place a decision-making process. So it includes, as Manager Vogel mentioned, a design matrix that lists different criteria for streets and what facility type would be most appropriate. As we talked about at the open house last week, the cycle tracks are a great fit for 8th Street. Something like that may have been excessive on Madison Street. So we got to right-size the infrastructure for the context of the street. The other thing that's important to know is that that context of the street may change over time, and so this plan needs to be flexible enough to adapt to those changing conditions. So in a practical scenario, as an example that's in your map, the very south end of Barlow Street is in the network map. We don't have any facilities right now. It was identified by the leadership team as a key connection for people coming into the city or leaving the city with all the development that's happening up on Lafreniere and with the Beta transfer station that's occurring up there. So if we have a project where we know we're reconstructing Barlow Street and we look at the network map and we see that that section is, then we know that we have some decisions to make about the facility type when we are designing Barlow. So, as we often do in our design team, we start asking all these questions. What's the right-of-way there? What are the constraints? What are the utility constraints? What's the condition of the underground utilities as part of this project? What needs to be replaced? What are the traffic volumes? What are the traffic patterns? All criteria that we can use to determine with that matrix what the best facility type for each street segment will be when it comes to implementation. Yep, so that just kind of finished walking through there. So a couple notes is that as far as implementing the mobility network of the map, it does take time because it takes money. This is not something that we can do over the course of a year. It will take us firm commitment from the city. This is where that strategic planning will really help guide staff in the prioritization of this from the city commission. There's a precedent for this, though. It's going to happen as fast as the city commission is willing to budget these priorities. In the past, we had the issue of sidewalks, and the city commission determined that that was a priority, so they bonded to get it done in a faster time frame as opposed to just, a mile every year. We got close to 20 miles, I believe. And with that, it's a living plan. It's something that we're going to work with throughout all our capital projects within our right-of-ways. And again, it's more than just infrastructure. This is talked about within the plan. It's about culture. So it's not just what you're building, but there are other policies that can help promote that culture as well. And we can all do our part too to help educate one another. And so then again, just to kind of close, we're going back to that network map. And for the next steps, as I mentioned at the onset, we already completed the supplemental portion of the master plan, which is really the data report. Today, we are completing the mobility action plan portion. August, I think that should be the 12th, Benjamin? Is that, sorry.
Should be.
So August 12th is your next meeting, and that's when we'll be going over the prescriptive part of the plan. So that's the part that's really guiding you into the future. Public engagement, last Thursday, we did have our open house. We had about 100 people come through, which I was very pleased with. It was pretty steady the whole time. As is common, these long lengthening projects, you tend to get diminished interest towards the end, which is understandable. But at the same time, the beginning of the process is when the input is most important, because that's when it's guiding us moving forward. So we do have a survey if you were not able to make it to that open house. It opened July 15th, and it'll be open through July 28th. So please, if you get the opportunity, take that survey, provide that feedback. We have our intern right now transcribing all the sticky notes and items that we received on Thursday for us. So the Planning Commission on August, 7th, because of the election, we've been moved to a Wednesday. They will be holding their public hearing. They set that last week. And then talking with Debbie, the chair, I think they'll bring it back on the 20th with anticipated approval, at which point it will come to the City Commission in September for approval. And that's it.
Thank you for that. And I'll open up, can we start with questions? Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead, Heather.
Well, responding to Liz Vogel's call out to state the valuable portions of this master plan, or map. I thought that the policy recommendations at the end were very valuable. The near-term improvements on pages 81 and 73, flexibility to implement small-scale tactical engagement and traffic calming, all of those were great at the end of the document. But I do have some questions. The first one has to do with the Active Transportation Committee. On page 81, you asked to dissolve that committee and move those powers to the Planning Commission. But I'm a little bit dubious about so many responsibilities at the Planning Commission, and how would you be reviewing resident feedback? The current committee right now includes TART and the Disability Network and MDOT and BETA, and how would omitting those perspectives be valuable? Yeah, that's a big question there.
Do you want to address them one at a time?
Yes,
that might be
please
easier.
do.
So I think from my perspective, listening to the leadership team, is that it was an area of redundancy. The intent is not to omit those voices from participation. But the Planning Commission does review new streets when they happen. So you have that public review process happening. And then we also have the design team where we start to work on designing these streets, or all capital projects actually. And when we have projects like the TART Trail, we invite TART to those meetings. So that input is still there, it's still valuable. We're strong partners with TART. We are in communication almost every day on projects with them. So I don't want to be characterized as they were getting omitted from that process, but it felt like as the team talked through this, that it created a lot of redundancies. And to be honest, I don't think the Active Transportation Committee has met in 2 years.
I was wondering
Yeah.
about that.
So that was the intent behind that recommendation. Yeah.
Well, right now, suggestions, recommendations, complaints are all flowing right directly to the City Commission. That seems inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that it's not your fault that that's happening. It's not the Planning Commission's fault, but a dedicated channel for those recommendations to come in would be great.
Right, and actually, we have been beta testing a new process, and it's ready to be launched pretty soon here. I just need to catch up with Deb tomorrow, our new Assistant City Manager. But we do have an online form that we've been testing to have a consistent, easy, reliable way for individuals to put their concerns in, and it auto-populates into an Excel spreadsheet. They'll get a response saying that we've received it, and then that would automatically go and be added onto the agenda at the next traffic committee. So we are streamlining those processes right now, because we realize that it's inefficient for when people have questions, concerns. The whole commission sees it, then I see it, then I try to reach out individually, and so streamlining that process and having it consistent with our traffic committee. So we are working on that, and actually, we should be done pretty quick.
So a resident that wants to make a complaint about a certain dangerous crossing, could they still choose to send that email to the city commission, or was it automatically going to get? Okay.
No, I mean, the city commission email is meant for anyone, for
Okay,
anything.
So
That's-
we're not
that's-
going to get shut out of those.
Oh,
things.
no, no, not at all. I mean, so any individual, if they would prefer to put it out to the commission, that's fine. I would then just direct them to say, hey, yes, thank you for sharing that with the commission. Now they are aware of this concern, and I would direct them to the link so that they could fill it out, so that we have a consistent process for the community.
Great.
Yeah, and I would add, I mean, because what Manager Vogel talked about is also addressing the inefficiencies that we have the neighborhood traffic calming program, we have the traffic committee, the active transportation committee, the mobility leadership team, the planning commission. Nothing was centralized through this process. And so like when someone has an issue with a dangerous intersection, they might email DPS, they might email parks or streets, they'll email engineering, they'll email the manager's office, they'll email planning. So there's no centralized way, and the traffic committee with new leadership there has really evolved, and it's much more efficient and responsive, but the work's not done yet. We had things on our agenda last month that we didn't get to that we'll talk about this month about improving all of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I keep going for a bit? Again, this is no fault of your own, but I am a very cowardly biker. I grew up on a farm. The only place I could bike was like in the cherry orchards. It was really stupid, and I felt very stupid. I tried taking my bike to Ann Arbor. I was terrified, and I am still terrified here. Now, I live on the east side, and I try to ride over here to go to this governmental center. But the crosswalk, or the crossing on Garfield to get to Washington, which is the east-west Tart, trail to, it's for pedestrians only. And there's one tiny little red dot on your maps. Now, it's obviously people aren't using it that came to those meetings, so the dots didn't get there, but there are people crossing on their bikes all the time. Sometimes there's big crowds. The cars don't stop because it's just pedestrians. Little people are on the signs. And I saw something, I don't know if it was in the ticker or if it was in the Record Eagle, saying, do I have to stop if this is a pedestrian crossing and there's a biker there? And the answer was no. So what was my point? My point is that I am terrified to ride my bike around. And I'm not the only one, because on page 20 you had a comment there that said, I walk and I drive my car. I don't ride my bike because it's taking my life into my own hands. I've given that up. So you've got all those facility treatments on pages 50 plus, and the con is always that you're sharing the street with the cars. This is the big problem. On my way here, I saw two bikers on East 8th on the sidewalk. I got up to 8th and Woodmere. I saw a biker on the south side of 8th Street. He crossed Woodmere on the light. He was fine. And he didn't go into the street. He went on the sidewalk. So I'm wondering, did you consider, what is your position on bikers on the sidewalk? Can you still get arrested for riding your bike on the sidewalk?
Well, as far as I know, it's never been an arrestable offense. I think it's a municipal civil infraction, which is a fine, and that's only applicable to downtown where that ordinance impacts. So if you're asking my personal opinion, I don't think outside of children, adults should be on sidewalks based on the width of our sidewalks, because it creates conflicts. But I don't think it's my place to say, if that's how you feel safe, then you shouldn't do it. I think there's ways to improve all of that. I think the bigger concern right now that we're hearing is the e-bikes on the sidewalk. 'Cause now we're introducing even greater speed and more intense conflicts.
Really quick, sorry, can I clarify something on that? And I just will look to Chief for a head nod. My understanding is it all of downtown, or is it the Front Street, State Street, where sidewalks or bikes are supposed to be banned on sidewalk? Or yes, no to just there?
I think there's more to it.
Okay, there's more nuance. Okay, well, there's more nuance. That was always what I was told when I was younger, is don't ride your bike on the sidewalk on State Street and Front Street, but we'll get more into the nuance, but I wanted to ask that because you asked, thank you.
I have a son who got in big trouble for riding his skateboard on the sidewalk downtown.
From
Okay,
mom or
so
the police?
All of this is sort of, all of this is leading to those facility treatment types. And I didn't see anything in there that would be a shared, there was a shared street section about State Street, but an east-west and a north-south corridor that would be shared, there would be signage, shared street, crosstown bike trail, local vehicle use only. So that, you know, like Washington Street, for example, and I don't know what the north-south would be, but something that's really more dedicated to bikers and discouraging of the vehicular traffic. I would like to see that.
Oh, so would we too, yeah, and that's why currently you'll see, like if you go out there today, there's remnants of a bike lane painted on Cass Street going south of 8th. And part of the discussion through this, as far as the north-south is, you know, not take it away from, but let's also look at Union Street, because Union Street gets less traffic. It's north-south, 1 block over, but it's not a connector to South Airport and the whole region to the south. Plus, Union Street leads you to a signalized light over or across Granby Parkway to our beaches and stuff. So that seems to be where people are more likely to go. And there's just more destinations on Union Street because you have Old Town, which is more developed on Union than it is on Cass and things like that. So, you know, those are the conversations we're going to have when we look at the volume and whatnot on Union Street leading into downtown. Probably a Shero or a adjacent bike lane isn't comfortable enough for most people. I know myself, I would recommend a separated, probably bi-directional bike lane on one side for that whole north-south corridor. That means we'll likely have to get rid of rural parking. So those are the conversations, and that's part of why the leadership team wasn't too prescriptive. If you start saying from the beginning on the map that there won't be parking here, 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 you lose everyone right away. So we have the map in place. Now we start working towards implementation, having those conversations. So,
Great,
and part of that comes from the support and will of the city commission too. Like, is this what you want to see and things like that.
I have just one more question, and that has to do with the street design manual. Now, I remember the street design manual. I remember looking at it, but it was not approved, and yet it's supposed to work in tandem with a mobility action plan. Doesn't it need to be approved?
So that preceded my time. When I started here, it was already used in practice by the different city departments, and it has been since. There's no other document that we have that can supplement that. It's the best that we have. So, I mean, I guess that's ultimately up for the city commission, but the projects, when they come to you, are to get approved for contracts, have been designed based on the input of that design manual, as well as public input and other staff members.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good point. Other questions at this time? Go ahead, Tim. Well,
But I'll just, how about I'll just try to address a few of what just came up there. And going in reverse order. So the street design manual, my best recollection is the city commission at that time was not supportive of it. And so it was decided that it would just be an internal staff document. And then backing up the Active Transportation Committee, I sat on that for a number of years. And from what I saw, it can serve a very important role. However, it needs at-large citizens to participate, and maybe the Cherry Capital Cycling Club to participate. Most everybody in there was representing an entity or organization, and so it tended to be very challenging for them to speak openly. And it can serve a purpose, say, for example, this sidewalk on Eastern Avenue that's been advocated by residents over there for years. That's not going to go anywhere at the Traffic Committee. And it's unlikely to go anywhere at the Planning Commission. But the Active Transportation Committee has the opportunity to, run that up the flagpole and say, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's encourage the City Commission to take action. Just my 2 cents. Traffic committee, sounds like maybe it's been reformed, but historically, it's anti-bicycle and anti-pedestrian. Hopefully it is reformed. So those, I'll stop there, just addressing some of your concerns.
Sure. Do we have other questions at this time?
Can I just address something there, Mayor?
Yep.
No, I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Warner, but the traffic committee is made up of our staff, and they're dedicated to making our streets safer. So I'm sorry if it was in the past, it felt like it was anti-pedestrian or anti-bicycle, but that's not the spirit of the committee that I know.
Commissioner Treadwell, you had your hand up first, and then I saw yours go up too, Jackie.
Yes, I suppose this is partly on me as a member of the Mobility Action Plan group, but it seems that the more engaged I get in the process and the further along the process it gets, the more I see, both looking through the documents of the plan itself and through my time just navigating the city itself, aspects that don't seem to be given enough attention. And I don't want to go back to square one at this point, but looking at, say, some of those areas that don't currently have sidewalk networks and aren't seen as getting a whole lot in new bike improvements, like the base of Old Mission Peninsula. Or I'd say in a similar vein is the south side of Fernwood Buffy Hill. Both those areas, due to how the streets are laid out and the level of traffic volume on non-arterial roads, I don't think we need to create a local version of the TART trail, but that doesn't mean that we can't see, hey, we don't need to put a sidewalk in every street, but there are a few places that we can put a sidewalk between this street and this street that would, to call out a personal case, allow Sean Winter to walk to Meyer if he wanted to without having to go all the way to 14th Street.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was a question, but again, I mean, that's the role that the city commission can play. If they say, we want a sidewalk here at the base of the peninsula, then they direct the city manager to do so, and she has us design and do that.
And I get that it is easier to look for, okay, where are our existing car corridors, and say, we're going to put additional infrastructure, be it sidewalks or bike paths or some other non-motorized transportation along that same route, but that can also be myopic in recognizing that there's places where you could put, it might just be an easement between two houses that you can create a connection between existing places that people walk, that you would never put a road through.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. We didn't get into that point of plotting out who we were going to ask easements from. We were really sticking within the public right-of-way for the most part.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Depending on, say, along Barlow Street, what sort of improvement is going to be done that could result in needing an easement of a few feet from property owners to expand the sidewalk or to put in a wider street for a bike lane.
Commissioner Treadwell, though we're not getting into designing right now.
Yeah,
I
and I'll
appreciate the
just
example so
add-
the public understands, but I want to keep
Easements-
us from getting too in the weeds on that.
Can be, tricky for implementation
I know,
when we
right.
require it. So we try to design it in a way that we don't, the north side of Hill Street from Safe Routes to School, it did not get a sidewalk because the property owners didn't want to provide the easement necessary to do the grading. Same thing, Delamar decided that they weren't going to provide the easement
Right.
after the marina thing. So it's, we can't force a property owner to give us an easement. We do continue to engage with them. In the case of Delamar, I've had meetings with the owner since they decided they didn't want to move the easement. I'm hopeful that we'll get there in the future, but for now, that's where we are. So, and that's where, when we look at that slide in here, it's building out a network is incremental. It takes time. And one thing that would help staff, I know, from the city commission is through your strategic planning, what are your priorities for implementing this plan, if it is a priority? Any guidance that you guys can provide to the staff through that strategic planning will help us operate staff and city commission more in lockstep. So,
Thank you. And go ahead, Jackie.
You teed up my question.
okay.
I'm interested in how this plan integrates, supports some of our other processes. You know, we've recently committed to a pretty formalized strategic planning process for the citywide. We also have a CIP process that you're intimately involved in, and I would like to hear more from you about, I know that it was mentioned somewhere that you hope to integrate bike and pedestrian infrastructure into the CIP process. And I guess I wasn't aware that it wasn't part of that already, and if you could fill us in on background for that first.
Yeah, so what we've not had since we started this process was that network vision map of where the facility types are supposed to go. So when, you know, we have segments of street to reconstruct, you know, is this part of the network? Do we need to consider the bike facility in here when we do this design or not? And so now we have that to guide us through that process. I mean, pedestrians are always, and bicyclists, thought about in the design, but now we have more tools memorialized in this plan that we never had before. So for instance, I had one of the engineers in my office on Thursday, because they're starting the design now for the reconstruction of Monroe Street, which will occur in 2 years. And he came to my office to say, what does the plan say for this? What is your mobility plan? So that he knows ahead of time. Now we'll bring that to design team and we'll all talk about it together, not just engineering and planning, but also utilities and DPS and maintenance as we go through those iterations, because you know, not only the cost of constructing it, but what's the ongoing maintenance burden that we're gonna have to make sure that we're allocating for. I'll give you a quick story of how a city did that wrong where I used to live in Richmond. They did a bike lane that was barrier protected with parked cars and a curb so that the cars couldn't go into the bike lane. They didn't think about the size of their street sweeper, so they couldn't sweep the bike lane, and the catch basins would get clogged, it would flood, and on cold mornings it would be ice. So those are the type of maintenance things that we want to make sure we're considering, and that's why we implemented the design team, a recommendation from this plan that we figured that's just good practice, we should start that now. So those are the type of things that we're working towards. Yeah.
All right.
And I will say, like, the city engineer was in our office also talking about Eastern Avenue, because they're talking about repaving that. What does the plan say? We see that it is on the network map, and so we started having those internal discussions. And more than likely, and I'd have to circle back with them because they're handling that, it would be a trail, a non-motorized trail from Peninsula Drive connecting to the existing non-motorized trail, which you can pick up at the NMC Eastern Elementary property line. So that's just two little examples.
Okay. And when I think of the CIP process, I also think of it as being heavily oriented toward prioritization of spending, and where do we put our limited financial resources, and is this plan going to also assist us in doing that?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, there's a lot of inputs that go into selecting CIP projects. In the case of right-of-ways like this, you know, where most of this work would occur, we look at pavement condition, infrastructure condition below ground, and things like that, which play into that prioritization. But we also try to spread things out over the 6 years, so we're not trying to budget everything at once. And that's really the goal, is to distribute that funding and also use it as a tool to communicate, hey, these are expenses in the next 6 years that are likely going to be coming to the city commission through the budgeting process.
And I think one of our hopes from the strategic plan is that we more effectively allocate our financial resources in support of our priorities, mission, vision, values. And one of the things I'm curious about is you have some very specific values indicated in the plan that were developed as part of the community engagement process. So people, environmental stewardship, connectivity, adaptability, and prosperity. What happens if we are 9 months from today and we've completed our citywide strategic planning process, and the mission, vision, values that come out of that aren't really aligned with these? vary in some way. Are we sure that we aren't getting the cart before the horse? I mean, I'm a classic strategist, and I would think that the strategic plan comes first, and then from that, mission, vision, values flow the rest of the planning process. So I'd love to hear a little more commentary about that from whoever has
I mean,
some
I will
insight to share.
start, I mean, I think Commissioner Vogel teed it up, having these plans in place going, sorry, Manager Vogel.
She's not up for election.
Just provides you with more information in your strategic planning process. You know, it is possible that the 7 of you set different goals and priorities, but, you know, this is what came out of the public process. So, you know, we're just reporting it out through the plan.
And there will be I'm sure, a rigorous public process as part of the strategic plan too.
I'm sure there, probably would be. So, I mean, they can diverge. Plans themselves change nothing. They're decision-making documents. They're used to help you make informed decisions because they're done through a public process, through community input. We have best practices placed in there. They're not a mandate, you know, so if you have different goals, then you can pursue those. I will say, though, you know, I was talking with the administration before the meeting today, and Grand Rapids is kind of held up as a model community that did really a lot with non-motorized mobility. And through this process, it was shared with us because 2 of our consultants used to be the planning director and traffic engineer for Grand Rapids, who they lived that experience. And their city mayor set a goal. We will have 100 miles of bike facilities in 5 years. And so that gave staff a charge and direction and what they needed to try to accomplish. And so setting those kind of benchmarks and goals as the elected body and communicating those to us will help all of it be more successful.
Really quickly, sorry, did you want to say something, Liz? It looked like you were.
Oh, I just wanted to, Commissioner Warner had a comment about Eastern earlier, but it's actually in design phase, the sidewalk project there. The engineering department has applied for a grant. They're hoping to expand the scope, so we'll have more information on that in the coming weeks.
Yeah, that's right. I think that grant got submitted last week, which would help to fund the extension of the TART, again, up Peninsula Drive to Eastern, And then rather than stopping at Eastern, which is what the scope of that TART engineering project was, we realized it was important to make that connection along Eastern Avenue as well. So that was included in the grant.
Commissioner Shaw, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question that's kind of feeding off what Jackie had to say, and what you called this plan, that it was just a decision-making document, it's not a mandate. So, for example, the design team that's outlined from Grand Rapids' experience on page 70, mandatory attendance run by the engineering department to bring everyone in together. I was thinking maybe we needed an infrastructure czar here in the city, and I was going to recommend that at the strategic planning when we were talking in the future. But maybe this would work as well. But how would that come about then? Who decides if there's a design team or not?
The actual design team was implemented actually under the interim city manager.
So it already exists as
Correct.
is in
Yeah, we meet
this
every Tuesday at
document.
10:30.
Yep, they meet right after staff meeting, and I'll let Sean speak to that. I'm not supposed to go. It's supposed to be a safe place for staff to go over plans, break down those silos, and, you know, to discuss and have ideas with free of their boss being in the room. So I actually appreciate that they have that freedom to be creative and work together. But I'll let Sean speak more to it.
And it is about the infrastructure improvements, all of you working together to...
Yeah, so real quick on the design team, and it's been, I'd say at least a half a year we've been meeting, if not closer to a year. But again, this draft has been done since October, and so that was already in the working draft leading up to that. And that's when it was discussed that that is a best practice that we should have been doing 20 years ago. In fact, they used to do it 20 years ago, back when we had a building department in the city. So many people have been around refer to the planning conference room as the PI room, because it was planning, inspection, engineering, because they would all work together on projects. I don't know why, somehow we got away from that and we became very siloed. So the design team was an attempt to break down those silos, put all the people that are working in development-related departments together to give input on a project. And although a plan doesn't mandate anything. We did create an administrative order, administrative policy that the then city manager signed that does say that attendance is mandatory, who the voting members are, how the process works, how the decisions are made. In this case, planning chairs it because planning kind of facilitates those things. But it's been very helpful too, because as we break down those silos, we start learning about what the other departments are looking for in designs to meet their requirements. And we all just are better informed because of that. Sometimes it gets really, really in the weeds, and I'm like, why are we talking about a 4-inch coupling for an hour? But those are the things that they have to work through to make that happen.
So you see it's been a successful 6-7 months.
Yeah, and so the criteria are any public project, so any infrastructure project, any commission-initiated project, so things from the Arts Commission, because we might have to consider underground utilities when they're installing things, and any private development that triggers the stormwater ordinance. So that's anything commercial, office, or 3 or more dwelling units. So therefore, as we're looking at the site plan, planning's not saying one thing and engineering saying another. We're all sitting there with the applicant together, talking about the requirements and the modifications that need to be made. And then we operate by votes, Robert rules, we keep minutes, all that stuff.
Thank you.
No, but it was a good question. So I'm going to jump in. I've been trying to give everybody a chance, but I had some questions of my own. The major one I had was kind of a project I've been half working on through some major changes as we've had leadership changes around here and retirements and new hires, et cetera, is the inconsistency of our signals at intersections. We've talked about how some, because of the turns and other aspects, are not even considered safe places on our intersections. And so I would always use the example of 8th Street right out here at Boardman has a fully ADA compliant signal. It makes noises so people know when they can walk if they're visually impaired. It has all kinds of indicators for people. But you go down the road just a little bit further, and at 8th and Rose, you don't even get the little walk signal if you don't hit the button. And so that's one thing I've been talking a lot with our city attorney about of, do we need to create a policy or an ordinance to make these a little more consistent throughout the community so that everybody has that extra layer of protection and accessibility? Is that something that would be would be part of the discussions as we integrate some of these ideas, or is that kind of a separate matter that I have to continue to pursue? Not putting that on you if I have to.
Well, I think
but
you raise a great question, and I think that could be looked at as a project in and of itself, signal optimization throughout the city. I mean, you heard from public comment earlier about the flasher at Veterans and 14th, and that makes sense for motorists. As someone who lives on 16th near Veterans, I'd never be able to cross. And I have a daughter that makes me take her to Leonie's like 4 days a week. So like getting to that ice cream shop is important, but if we never get that break because of volume, and there isn't a quote beg button, I think there is a need to make our intersection crossings ADA compliant to ensure that all of them are. And there's some great technology that's coming out. I don't know how great it is in practice, but it's moving in the right direction. And it'd be worth checking with engineering, because I think they were piloting new technology at 8th and Boardman here. So even though there is a beg button, if you look, there's a camera up there, and it's supposed to be picking up when people are queuing up to cross. So those are ways that we can have the pedestrian signals adjust in real time for the needs of the different modes that are using it without forcing someone to get off a bike and hit a button or, things like that.
Okay, great. I'll keep that conversation going offline, but I appreciate that.
Yeah.
The other question I have is we often get, as we've been going through these planning processes with MDOT, we hear that, the traffic demand doesn't demand this or doesn't for a hawk or something along those lines. Will and I guess this is kind of an overall thing, but I'm asking, you've laid out how this will help the city to make decisions for a bag button, things like that. Does this also help us when we sit down and talk? I mean, I don't think MDOT's coming back after a couple of years from now. They'll be spending a lot of money in this area over the next couple of years. But does this also help us when we do sit down with MDOT and others to kind of have these more defined policies and demarcated areas and potential improvements as we go along of more cooperation as we're working with them or other entities that are outside of our sphere? Maybe it's road commission, whomever else.
I would say, yeah, because like even in the current project that's under construction right now, the intersection of East Front and Grandview Parkway, when MDOT brought it to the city, was very different, but we had gone through the East Front planning process, and that plan indicated the desire to tee up the intersection. So we showed that to them, and then they modified on that. So being able to show them, like, hey, we went through a public process, and this is what was desired, they were, I would guess, a little more accommodating to that.
Okay.
So that would be my response.
Thank you.
Yeah.
More questions? Go ahead, Tim.
So for Eastern Avenue, the neighbors there have been asking for a sidewalk for a number of years. This city commission pushed for a sidewalk before the MDOT detour, that was the last city commission. Staff said, well, we don't have the survey yet, can't do it. There was a temporary put in halfway between Milliken and Peninsula, but not all the way. And now it sounds like the plan is to wait and see if there's a grant and put in a multi-use path instead of a sidewalk. How does that approach coincide with this decision matrix? I feel like the citizens that live close by and have been asking for it are being put off because somebody's decided, no, let's do a multi-use path, so let's just hold off on that sidewalk. Like, how's this matrix being used, even if this hasn't been approved yet, to guide us toward a multi-use path
I
instead of a
don't know that it's
sidewalk?
been designed as, I literally have just a bare minimum amount of information. I'm meeting with my engineer tomorrow, so we're going to talk about it. But
Okay.
to say that it's been changed from sidewalk to multi-use, I can't answer that.
Well, that's what I thought I was hearing, is that we're pursuing a grant for a multi-use path there. The citizens have asked for a sidewalk for years. I've advocated for a sidewalk. The previous city commission advocated for a sidewalk. I think it's disingenuous to just jump in and say, oh, let's do a multi-use path because whatever, if we got a matrix here and a decision process to try to decide what makes the most sense. Because there's a lot of things that go into that, as the matrix shows, the decision process, including the money, including how much time it takes, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll leave that there, but yes, please discuss it with your staff. Question about, it's in a lot of these maps here, the HAWKs, the RRFBs, talking about crossings. Nowhere in here am I seeing the stop for pedestrian signs. Were they discussed by the leadership team?
No, I don't think that came up.
That's a key part of our pedestrian safety, is the stop for pedestrian signs, and citizens are asking for them frequently, like, hey, can I get one here, can I get one there? That's a key part, and it's very low-hanging fruit, and it's extremely effective. Like, when I see the sign and I see a pedestrian, people stop, and the very next crosswalk that doesn't have a sign, drivers don't stop. There's a mom with her little stroller there, people don't stop. So even though it applies everywhere and the signs are supposed to be just reminders, and so we could have more, we err on the side of fewer or less, whichever it is.
Can I ask actually a
I
follow,
just-
really quick,
Sorry,
Sean, before you, oh,
it's
go ahead.
why? There's,
I wanted to ask, related, sorry.
okay, go ahead.
About, do we know if there's a threshold at some point that it becomes a blindness? And I will only say this because I was almost hit in a
That's
crosswalk
what we were
that
told
had
a
one
long
in
time
it.
ago.
But I'm asking if there's information about that, because I was almost hit 2 weeks ago in the middle of a crosswalk, walking by the little cross thing, and a car that I thought saw me, just like literally somebody got out of their car to see if I'd been hit, because that's how close they came to not hitting their brakes. And I'm
There's
not
not a
saying
study
that.
that's been shared with us, but that was the argument that was used from the very start of why we can't have more, and yet we have stop signs everywhere.
I'm
and
not
we don't
saying
say,
that-
oh, people stopping for stop signs, there's
Tim,
too
I
many.
wasn't trying to argue with you, I'm just asking if there is
Great,
such
I'm
data,
done
let's
with that
hear
argument,
it.
because it's been used since the very
If
implementation
there's not,
started.
then let's
Right.
hear from the
Or
authorities
let's use the ones we
here.
have and let's move them around, because they're reminders, like, let's move this one down the street a block, move it down the street a block, move it all over. Anyhow, where I'm going with this, and sorry to get all head spinny on you, we already have a network. Like, a lot of these lines in here, they already exist. And we have goals related to the climate crisis. And we should have a goal of a zero carbon transportation network, I'd say by 2040. And with everything I hear, by 2030, we need to really have our poop in a pile. That's only a few years off. And so all these places in this document where it says incremental and a little here and a little there, that's not going to get us there. Like, we need something quickly, and so that's why I refer to the network that we already have, the stop for pedestrian signs we already have. There's so much we could do with what we have. We have a bike lane on Front Street, essentially from the city limits on the west, all the way down to Railroad, which most people don't, sorry, Front Street then is one way, so you have to go onto State Street. But until you get to Pine, it's terrible. Like, some places, the little bike white paint thing doesn't even fit in the bike lane. The bike lane is so narrow. I can't imagine that you had discussions about how wide a bike lane should be. So there's so much we can do with what we have. So we don't have to upset the drivers and tell them, hey, we're getting rid of your parking here and getting rid of your parking there. We just need to do better with what we have. There's so much we could do, whether it's those bike lanes or related to the bike lanes. My neighbor, who only talks to me occasionally over the back fence, great neighbor, but as far as he tries not to bother me about city things, but he asked because he almost hit a cyclist on State Street. So where Progressive AE told us to remove part of the bike lane as you're headed east approaching Cass, we removed part of that bike lane because we created a left turn lane and a straight and right turn lane. And so now that bicycle lane headed east on State Street just kind of ends, and the motor vehicle traffic is forced across the bike lane into the same space. And so my neighbor, who used to bike downtown, but is retired and doesn't feel safe biking downtown, was in a motor vehicle approaching Cass Street, stopped there, had his right turn signal on, and then a cyclist came along the right-hand side, and he almost clipped him. And he felt horrible. He didn't want to hit, but the cyclist squeezed between. And to me, again, it's partly, and what I explained to my neighbor, we don't tell motor vehicles what to do there. We don't tell bicyclists what to do there. So of course we're going to have accidents. Like, we don't tell anybody what to do, but we already have a bike lane a little bit further back. Like, we could tell people what to do. Nobody wants to hit anybody. Again, we have a network. There's a lot we could do with what we already have. I'm not saying let's not invest in more, but this, to me, it's like the sidewalks. You referenced sidewalks. Before the city commission at that time approved the bonding, we had a 100-year plan for sidewalks. We had this plan, we were going to do infill and we're going to fix this and fix that, but it was going to take 100 years. So it wasn't until the city commission said, wait a second, we want to get it done. Like, we want to actually do something. And so with no sense of whatever in here, if you put something in there that kind of got to the urgency and that indicated that, hey, we've got a network, let's maybe have some standards as far as like a bike lane width, how we encourage motorists and bicyclists to interact and respect each other, how to use our stop for pedestrian signs. Norte doesn't even use the counterflow bike lane on 7th Street because it's so bad. And if Norte, with coaches and kids who they're teaching how to cycle on the streets, doesn't feel comfortable on part of a network we already have, maybe we could talk to them, maybe talk to the coaches and say, hey, what would it take to upgrade this, whatever it might be, to make it more comfortable? Like, we have so much, and yet we're looking to build more, spend more money. It's going to take years, might take decades. Let's get our act together. I'll stop. Sorry for all the heads. Oh, one last thing.
Yeah.
TC Light and Power will now give you $300 for an e-bike. So to the point that was made earlier, there's going to be just more and more and more. So let's get going. Let's not just wait for another strategic plan, and maybe we'll wait a little more, and then maybe we'll wait a little more. Like, let's do things.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
mean, you raised some very excellent points, and I think, there's nothing stopping this commission for instructing their city manager on what they want with those stop for pedestrian signs. It doesn't have to be in the plan. You can sit there and put it on the next agenda and say, we want to come up with a plan for that. I would agree. A lot of our existing network is subpar. Those standards aren't in here because they're already memorialized in a document called AASHTO. So standards for bike lanes, cycle tracks, non-motorized trails, those are all established already. So those are engineering standards that are used. And I mean, I would like to see us move towards carbon neutrality too, but in the own admission there isn't a goal for that. So this plan doesn't speak to that because that goal isn't established. That's where that strategic plan helps you guys establish what those goals are, so we have more defined parameters to work within to meet your goals, so.
Go ahead, Heather.
Those disappearing bike lanes at intersections are all over the place. Garfield in
Yeah.
front,
Mm-hmm.
you know, Garfield in the 8th. Disappearing bike lanes on like Peninsula Drive where they go from 5 feet to like 2 feet. Is there anything that would stop us from creating signage that would flow bike traffic onto sidewalks in those places?
I would probably hesitate for that. I think you're just inviting more conflicts with the pedestrians on the sidewalks. You know, I
What
think there's-
pedestrians?
What's that?
Hardly any pedestrians. Like if you take 8th and Garfield before the oil change place, I mean, yes, there are some on that corner.
Mhm.
But if the signage was appropriate, wouldn't it say, you know, use caution? It's better than getting clipped right on that corner because the cars take over the bike lane. And it's
Oh,
the
yeah.
same on Garfield in front.
And every intersection on Front Street's the same way too. Yeah, I think there's better solutions than diverting bikes onto some.
I'd like to
Because
hear
one
them.
thing we talked about was, remember how we talked about the social district and the placemaking that came out of the tactical urbanism that the leadership team identified? One object was right here on 8th Street, just west of the bridge. So you have a row of parking in front of Midtown right there, and the bike lane is outside the parking. Well, in many communities, they use the parked cars as separation from the travel lane, and we talked through that about flip-flopping them as a tactical project. And a lot of the people that are bicyclists, you know, they understand the behavior. They're like, people are just gonna go in a straight line. So I would apply that same logic to the most comfortable cyclists. Now, some who don't feel comfortable might jump up onto the sidewalk. They might do it now anyways, but I think by taking that approach, we're not fixing the problem, you know, like let's find a better solution. And we have a lot of new staff here now working on this, so it's a very encouraging time. I had the chance to sit down with our city engineer because she used to be a DPS director in a snowy climate with lots of bike lanes and talking about, okay, how do we overcome the maintenance issue of clearing those protected bike lanes and stuff. So we have insight on staff that we didn't have 5 years ago, so I think we're at a
Well, to
creative time.
reinforce Tim's point, we have a lot of infrastructure that's already here. We have a lot of stuff that's already here. So how can we use that stuff without spending a whole bunch of money creatively to solve some of these problems?
So, and that's a good question. And one thing we've been talking about is like one of the cheapest things you can do is paint, right? But we know the message we've heard about using less paint. So that's where the city commission, like where do we want to go with that? That's where internally we struggle with the different dialogue, you know, like use less paint, but let's paint more bike lanes, let's make wider bike lanes, let's, you know, connect the crossing at Park Street with more paint. So we're kind of confused, to be frank, so.
And I just really wanted to piggyback. What you're saying is, the examples given on State Street are really good, and I think both as, I don't bike on State Streets. I haven't before because it was too fast before, and now it doesn't make any sense. But I think that to that point, we are wrapping up that has been a pilot these last couple of years as a reminder. I think, hopefully, it's been working well for us to keep it two-way. But what exactly that's gonna look like in long-term is going to depend on funding, but I don't think, at least the conversations I've had with people on the DDA board in downtown is, yeah, it's done, let's leave it like that and never think about it again for a couple of years. If it's going to be permanent, if the pilot's over and we want to keep it two ways, then becomes the time to put some of these ideas and practices and do some things with taking parking off or doing other things that we can do to make it more manageable. It's been kind of shoehorned in, as you said, things just end, there's left turn lane here, there's not one there. So I think that's where, if that does stay permanent, there's some opportunities already early on in this process to improve a major street. So just sharing that out, because I think a lot of us have gotten used to it. And it's actually is a pilot, so there's some opportunity there for it to improve. Do we have other questions, comments? Go ahead, Tim.
Just the last thing. So we used to have a Complete Streets ad hoc that was acting on the Complete Streets, resolution to develop a Complete Streets policy. Could we have that possibly on the August 12th agenda, even though that's a special meeting, just to consider reestablishing that?
We can have that discussion, I think, and then to your point, Tim, we were on that and was the victim through some of the leadership changes, and that's a good point to bring it back to have a conversation about it with this newer commission.
Thank you.
I support that. I think it'd be a good idea. Start picking these things apart and making sense of them.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Okay, seeing none, this was a study session, so there's no action to be taken.
Thank you.
So thank you, Sean, and thank you, Debbie Hershey, for being here from the Planning Commission. And with that, that is our full agenda for tonight for the study session portion. I guess I would say, does anybody have any final comments? Seeing none, I will open up for final public comment. So study sessions don't usually have them per agenda item, so this can be about the agenda item we just discussed, or it can be about anything else you want to talk about.
Justin Reed. So one thing is the street lights in Traverse City are very old. So when thinking about, eventually reconstructing 14th Street, I'm pretty much sure part of the thing is talking about how to get a new traffic light right there to modern standards with the ADA compatibility, and putting new lights, restoring new lights, is very expensive. It's not cheap at all. So if you want to do anything with the traffic signals, that's a very heavy expense, and that has to be incremental. So eventually, the pedestrians will be safe going across these older lights once they've been replaced with new modern technology. And also to talk about the mobility plan I think it's excellent. I do say that the fact that the pedestrians that cross on crosswalks, that is a city ordinance, I believe, with the stopping in crosswalks, vehicles have to. However, in any capability of any state or any state truck lines, that's a little different because that has to deal with the state, the motor code, and there's nothing in the motor code that says unless it is if it is a local ordinance, the state motor code, trumps that, to where if it's not a state truck line, if it's just a local road, then it adheres to the local ordinance. So thank you.
Thank you.
A little bit excited after what I'm hearing tonight. My name is Rick Venner. I'm a city resident, 1660 Wayne Street. I'm also the vice president of the Cherry Capital Cycling Club, 550 members strong. I'm also on the advocacy committee for the cycling club, of which Richard Robbins, who you've met tonight, is the chair. And I'm actually kind of excited because what I'm hearing is from you guys is maybe we need some more voice. And having kept fairly close eye on the Mobility Action Plan and seeing what's happening, it motivated a number of us to form an alliance of area nonprofits, which, by the way, influence thousands of local residents with the same mutual goals. Those goals are dedicated to a dedication to safer and better mobility for cycling, running, and pedestrians, whether disabled or not. The alliance, yet to be named, purpose is to help guide you and other decision makers in a united but positive and supportive voice. All parties involved in this alliance are well informed concerning the Mobility Action Plan. So I wanted to sort of introduce that concept to you folks. A lot of the people that, I don't want to start naming off who's who, but we've got a working group and an executive committee. The working group are people that you're already part of talking with. I think Sean said he talks with every day. We've got a pretty strong group coming together with so that we have a common voice, so that we can better communicate with you rather than just peppering you with this intersection and that type of stuff. So that's really the only reason I'm here today, other than I'd love to take your questions if you have any.
That's, public comment is just for public comment, but
Okay.
we can certainly have some, make sure that people understand that they can reach out to you and to the club and get
Yeah.
some more questions answered or share any more information with you.
All right, wonderful, wonderful, thank you.
Just a follow-up point, Richard Robbins again, do I have to state address and all that? Okay. Is one of the, it was brought up by the commission as well as Sean, one of the practical applications right now to increase safety immediately, continue to help change the culture of auto drivers, and show Traverse City's commitment to non-auto transportation is repainting. This is a huge thing. This changes people's perception when they see a white line, they see bike lane information on the road, and if you have an opportunity, I'll be sending this to you and to the commission email address, a link to a movie that was shown during Smart Commute Week, of which I coordinated Cherry Capital Cycling Club's participation, about how that is done in the Netherlands. A lot of it's done with paint on the ground. And I know we have environmental issues. Paint doesn't last as long because it's water-based versus VOC. I get it. But that's not the point. The point is paint makes a difference, and we have that's a cost. That's table stakes cost in order to keep people safe. So I just bring that up as a point that painting is like table stakes, guys, and it saves lives. So that's my only point. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment at this time? And again, this is for the study session or general, so please come with anything that anybody has to say.
Doug Kimball, 523 North Spruce Street, Traverse City resident. There's a lot of talk about community involvement, community input, supposed to help formulate the plan. And specifically, I've said this before a couple weeks ago, specifically, our input, Slab Town listening sessions was overlooked. It was, or maybe ignored, or it was as if we didn't say a word. It was as if we never showed up. And I'm referring to the proposed rezoning of Bay Street. If you go to the listening session report, every comment says, we don't want any of the proposed rezoning that was put in the plan. We go to those sessions, thinking this is what we're supposed to do, and you will use it to formulate the plan. But it didn't happen, and so we have to come back continually to have our voices heard here, especially, and through email. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Any other public comment on anything else? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Are there any final thoughts on anything from the commission? Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, just on paint, because I've been one of the people that's spoken against too much use of paint. And maybe those weren't my exact words previously, but we have some streets where we put double yellow lines in the residential streets. So there's places we don't need the paint, but certainly a faded bike lane could use an updated splash of paint, and that's what's happened on Pine and State Street. They're pretty much invisible in some stretches, and so when I bike along and cars are halfway into the bike lane, I don't get upset with them because they don't know it's a bike lane. There's nothing that tells them it is.
Thank you for that clarification, Commissioner Warner. I know you've had larger discussions about that. Any other comments from the commission? All right, I'll just close with saying, first, everybody remember that we do have early voting here. So in addition to absentees, we have the election coming up on the 6th, which is why we will not be meeting for the next 2 weeks. That was mentioned at the top of the meeting. 5th Monday and election, but we have early voting as well as day of, as well as absentees, if you've gotten yours. So make sure you vote. And also just to share, I think Benjamin did a very wonderful tribute to Janine Easterday at the top, and I just want to share that there will also be a memorial for her on the 7th of August at the Park Place, I believe. So
Yes,
if anybody's
from
interested.
6 to 9 p.m.
Thank you. I couldn't remember if I had the times. So just to throw that out there, because that will happen before the next time we meet. So everyone, in the meantime, have a great couple of weeks with the summer here, and thank you all for all your participation. We appreciate it. Meeting adjourned.